Last January, I was playing basketball in my adult basketball league like I've done nearly every week since I stopped playing collegiately, and I tore my right side Achilles tendon. Statistically speaking, it was likely to happen to someone like me. I was 30 years old, basically a weekend warrior, meaning I was playing this physically strenuous sport a few times a week, more casually, and after taking a few years off from playing regularly due to COVID, it's possible my body wasn't as strong as it was before that time off. Learning the injury was a gnarly one that could take up to at least a full year for recovery. It's safe to say I was pretty devastated at first. I had so many questions, but realized most of what I was always trying to figure out would come back to trying to understand how long it would take to reach the different recovery milestones. Ultimately, getting myself back to playing basketball again like I wanted to. So maybe if you're watching this video, you found yourself in a similar sort of situation to my own, trying to figure out what to do next. Since it's now been a full year since this all went down for me, I want to share with you the exact timeline from the moment I tore my Achilles, the various doctor's appointments I went to surgery, post-op recovery, physical therapy milestones, and all the way to where I'm at now. Meaning in this video, I'm going to share with you a full timeline of recovering from my Achilles tendon rupture. My hope is that you'll take my story as an example of what you could expect with your recovery, but there is a huge caveat. I've learned very clearly through my own research on this injury and through talking to many of you online about your stories that there are so many variables at play that can make your recovery journey much different to my own. Where you live makes a big difference. Deciding to go the surgical or non-surgical route will greatly change your story to mine. There's also the advancements in technology that your doctor may have access to, what's actually going on inside your leg that only you and your doctor will know about. There's the doctor's post-op recovery protocol, who you work with on physical therapy. It all makes a really big difference. So whether you're like me and had very clear goals to get back into playing basketball competitively, or would rather hang up the shoes and just get back to everyday activity, my hope is that with me sharing my story and recovery timeline here on YouTube, that will help you start to feel more comfortable in understanding this injury, make some connections to your own story, and ultimately help you ask better questions with your healthcare providers to better understand what's possible with your injury. So with that all out of the way, here's the full timeline to my recovery from tearing my Achilles tendon. Okay, the very beginning of my story brings us all the way back to Tuesday, January 18th, 2022. Like I mentioned, I tore my Achilles playing basketball in an adult rec league here in San Diego, California, where I live. The game was late. I believe it was a 7 p.m. game, so I probably tore my Achilles sometime close to 8 p.m. I tore my right side Achilles, so I was driven home by a friend and probably was home around 8:30 p.m. or so. I bring up this level of granularity to the story because it was late in the evening, which meant like no doctor's offices were open. One of my husband's close college friends is in orthopedics, so we were also texting with him about the situation, and based off of what we were telling him, we were all pretty certain that I had tore my Achilles. With this in mind, I decided to just wait until the morning to try and see any sort of professional. Basically, I was chilling at home, icing my foot. I was sad, but I was doing fine, and we didn't think it would be necessary to go to the ER or anything. What I did do to prepare for the morning was find a few doctor's offices I could call first thing in the morning to get going with what would be next to my recovery. I specifically searched for sports medicine doctors and was basically looking for orthopedic surgeons who specialized in sports medicine, since I injured myself playing basketball and I've been an athlete my whole life. I found a few options that I liked and I went to bed, and then that brings us to January 19th. First thing I did in the morning was call the first doctor on my list, which was Murphy's Sports Medicine Center, based here in San Diego in La Jolla. I was really stoked because I was able to get an appointment with Dr. Murphy, who was my first choice, but the earliest appointment wasn't until Friday, January 21st. I locked in that appointment and then decided to try and make an appointment with my primary care doctor so I could get their opinion as well. There wasn't any available appointments that day, so instead I called in using the 24/7 video appointment feature my doctor's office offers. Side note, I highly recommend One Medical for primary medical care. I love the doctors and the quality of their technical systems is very good. The doctor I spoke to that morning basically said the next steps for figuring out what was going on would be to get imaging work done, but I would need to be seen in person to get a referral for x-rays or an MRI. This is because of how insurance works here in the US, so if you're not in the US or not using similar insurance to what I use to pay for medical costs, then you may be able to get imaging work done more easily than I was. The other main thing she told me to do was to buy a boot and start using it right away. Nothing fancy, just something I could use to protect my injury for now. I ordered a boot off of Amazon with Amazon Prime after the call, and it was actually one of those Amazon products that comes same day, so I was able to get it just a few hours later. Side note again, I'll include all the products I mentioned in this video in the description below in case you want to check them out for yourself. After the call and buying the boot on Amazon, I was thinking best case scenario is that I could somehow try to see my primary care care doctor that day or the days leading up to my appointment with Dr. Murphy to try and get some imaging work done and then be able to bring that documentation to my appointment on Friday so we could have more information to go off for that appointment. Based on the research I had done the night before and talking to our friend in orthopedics, I knew that if I did have a full tear that I would likely get surgery, and if this was the case, I wanted to try and get started with it as soon as possible. I'd also taken a sick day that day from work, so I was just lying in bed, reading about the injury, watching YouTube videos, and refreshing the doctor's schedule, trying to see if I could get one for later that day. And miraculously, an appointment did open up at my doctor's office later that afternoon, and it did work with my husband's schedule because I couldn't drive myself, so I needed him to drive me. So we went there together on the 19th in the afternoon. Unfortunately though, my doctor wasn't able to help me get imaging work done before the appointment Friday and basically said I would need to find a specialist to get a referral anyway, and I'd already done that by getting that appointment on Friday, so they couldn't really help me further things along at that point. They did give me a set of crutches though to borrow, which was really helpful, and I used them for about 2 months before giving them back. Let's fast forward to Friday, January 21st, which was my appointment with Dr. Murphy. During my evaluation, they were pretty certain I had fully ruptured my Achilles, but in order to get a proper insurance paid for diagnosis, I would need to get that imaging work done. The first step here would be getting an x-ray, and with x-ray results ruling out anything bone related, then I could get a referral for an MRI. This again is all insurance related protocol. Dr. Murphy's office has an in-house x-ray machine, so we were able to get those results back right away. Of course, as the story goes, those x-ray results didn't show anything useful, so on Friday I was able to get that referral for an MRI appointment, which I called for as soon as I left the office. One other thing to mention about this appointment before moving on was that I left this appointment with a medically prescribed boot, which was much more supportive of my injury than the Amazon one, which got me through those first few days. The boot I got in the office would be the boot I ended up spending the following 2 months in to help me during my recovery. Since it was Friday and the MRI offices don't work on weekends, the earliest MRI appointment I could get myself was for Monday. So again, a bit of a waiting game to get that next step, but I really did feel like I was doing as much as I could to get work done right away, within my situation. On Monday, January 24th, I got the MRI. It was my first MRI and it was an interesting experience. And I think I'm glad I only had to stick my leg in that big loud machine for the first time. It was a whole thing. For MRIs, you have to make sure not to wear anything metal, and if you do have something you can't take off, then you have to reschedule the appointment, and I didn't want that to happen. That would totally suck. For me, I have a nose ring that is more permanently in my nose, and I need help getting it out, so I went to a piercing store that weekend, and they graciously helped me take it out and then put in a temporary one that I could take in and out on my own. I honestly think I would have been fine without doing this because I did only stick my leg in the machine, but I didn't want to show up there and have them turn me away, so I did it. And then later I also learned that you have to take out any jewelry for surgery anyway, so I'm glad I did it then, and I just basically kept my nose ring out until after I was all done with it all. All right, MRIs. MRIs take at least 2 days for results to come through, so I went back to Dr. Murphy's to see what they showed on Wednesday, January 26th. This is now just over a week since my injury. And surprise, surprise, the results showed that full rupture, and we were now talking about next steps with surgery. Dr. Murphy has certain days he performs surgery on and other days he's in the office, which meant I could only schedule surgery on days that aligned with that schedule. The earliest appointment I was able to get for surgery was about a week later on Tuesday, February 1st. This was exactly 2 weeks from my injury. Surgery was at 12:30 p.m. that day, and that was officially the start of my road to recovery. I returned home on Tuesday, February 1st, a little drowsy with my leg all wrapped up in a splint. I was also given a nerve block during surgery, which blocked the feeling in my injured side leg for about 32 to 48 hours after the surgery. This was the beginning of my non-weight bearing days, which basically means the time frame where I was not walking on or using that leg for any period of time. Another big milestone that week was on Thursday, February 3rd, where I took my first seated shower since surgery, and I used a plastic cast protector in the shower as well as I sat on a shower stool. On Friday, February 4th, I left my bedroom for the first time and even made it outside to get a meal with some family that was visiting us that week. This is also the first day I took my knee scooter outside, very carefully of course, and this was the first day I stopped using my prescribed painkiller medicine. Wednesday, February 9th was my first post-operation follow-up appointment with Dr. Murphy, which was just over 1 week since injury. On this day, they cut the splint off my leg and evaluated how things were healing. Things looked good, so I was then told I could start doing light range of motion exercises at home. Again, this is the protocol my doctor gave me with my recovery based on my injury and the surgery he did for me. Please don't attempt anything I say in this video on your own without talking to your healthcare provider. Okay, back to the timeline. Before leaving that appointment, I was back in my boot, the one they gave me at our first appointment, but this time they set the boot's positioning to be at the correct flexion point I needed for healing during that time in my recovery. Basically, my foot was locked into a more pointed position. The next milestone would be Monday, February 14th, just shy of 2 weeks post-op, where I got my stitches out and I could now wash my leg for the first time without using the cast protector. No submerging my leg in water or having it in water for long periods of time, but it was nice to be able to finally wash that leg after it being in a smelly splint and boot for 2 weeks. At this point, I was still non-weight bearing, but they did move my boot into the neutral position, which is walking position. The work I was doing with my ROM exercises at home was totally paying off. At this point, I stopped tracking exactly when my appointments were, but I was still seeing Dr. Murphy quite often as I was hitting more milestones. For example, on February 28th, I was approved to begin walking on my own with my boot on, and I did attempt walking for the first time with Dr. Murphy present. This was exactly 1 day before hitting 4 weeks post-op. I also went from completely non-weight bearing to weight bearing, which I think is a bit unique to what I've learned about other people's recovery stories. On Monday, March 7th, just 1 week before hitting 5 weeks post-op, I took my first standing shower since my surgery, which was super nice. I was still wearing the boot during this time, and the only time I would take it off was for showering. I'd carefully take it off, get in the shower, take a shower, carefully get out of the shower, dry my leg off, and then get the boot back on right away. By this milestone, I was also approved to submerge my leg in water, which I did about a week or so later on March 19th at my friend's bachelorette weekend in Scottsdale, Arizona, which yes, I did travel for. Just 2 days later on March 21st, at about 7 weeks post-op, I had a really big appointment with lots of new milestones. On this day, I was approved to start walking again on my own without the boot. I was also cleared to drive on my own, which was really exciting because I would get some of my independence back. And I was also able to start sleeping without the boot on. Lastly, I was given a list of physical therapists they recommended in the area and told me I should start seeing a PT right away so they could help me with strengthening in this new phase in my recovery journey. I called the PT office that was closest to where I lived, and the earliest appointment I could get with them was for the following week. Although I was cleared to drive on March 21st, I didn't attempt driving until the next day, which was on March 22nd. Driving was totally fine, but I did notice my leg getting tired more easily from pushing on the pedals, so I gradually got back into driving longer distances as I felt I was able to. On March 23rd, I wore jeans for the first time, which was a milestone I documented and was excited about considering I wasn't able to wear jeans or really any long pants that weren't leggings with my boot. On Monday, March 28th, I had my first physical therapy appointment, and this was just 1 day before my 8-week post-op milestone. At this point, I started seeing my physical therapist twice a week with the main focus of the first month and a half being on simply learning to walk again. 2 days later, on March 30th, and with the blessing of my PT, I started to do standstill bike workouts regularly, and I was lucky to be able to borrow my neighbor's Peloton for workouts during this time. I didn't hit any big milestones in April until the very end of the month, but that said, I remember this time being very challenging for me at physical therapy. PT was really painful at times, and it was hard teaching my body to use tendons and muscles it hadn't used for a while. On Saturday, April 30th, I took my first short walk on the beach for a beach day with my friends. My PT had cleared me to do this, which is why I documented it. I actually remember having to pee really badly on this day, and there was only one restroom down the beach a bit, so after trying to hold it in for a while, I attempted walking there. It was actually really hard, so after I went to the bathroom, I went back to the street and took like the long way all the way around to walk back to where we were hanging out. On Monday, June 6th, around 18 weeks post-op, I was cleared to go for bike rides on the street again and attempt hiking. It wasn't until Sunday, June 19th that I did do my first outdoor bike ride around the neighborhood, which went really well. The week of my 21 weeks post-op milestone was my wedding day, Saturday, July 2nd. We were lucky to have the most perfect and beautiful wedding back in the Midwest where we both grew up. I decided not to wear heels this day for the wedding, but I certainly think I could have if I really wanted to. I will say I remember my Achilles feeling quite sore the next day after walking around on it all day and dancing on it all night. On Monday, July 4th, we set off for our honeymoon in Costa Rica, and on Wednesday, July 6th, we did the infamous La Leona waterfall hike, which I talk about in my 5 months post-op video. On Sunday, July 24th, around 25 weeks post-op, I took my first Pilates class, which was on the reformer machines, which if you know anything about Pilates, it's a full body strengthening workout where you use a lot of leg strength. So it was really exciting that I got to that point, and I love Pilates now. At 26 weeks post-op, on Wednesday, August 3rd, I was cleared to start jogging again and started a walk to jog program assigned by my PT. I probably could have attempted this program a bit earlier, but I started experiencing some pain on my non-injured side leg leg that my PT wanted to sort out before we got to this next step. The walk to jog program went on for a few weeks where I would introduce more time to the workout. Also on Saturday, August 6th, I wore heels for the first time all night at my friend's wedding. I don't remember experiencing any pain the next morning from wearing heels and felt very confident wearing them with no issues. It was while I was getting back into this higher level of activity when I found out the wonderful news that I was pregnant, which was around 28 weeks post-op. That didn't stop me from getting back into running. It was on Sunday, August 28th, around the 30 weeks post-op mark, that I was consistently running for 10 minutes straight without breaks for walking. Basically, all of September and October, I was traveling away from home, so I stopped seeing my PT during this time. My husband and I attended 4 weddings in those 2 months, and I wore heels at all of them, and we took a trip to Spain where we did a lot of walking around. I'd say during this time, I was definitely feeling physically good with where I was at in my recovery, while I was also at the beginning stages now of growing a baby, which I've learned is very physically challenging in other ways. We returned home towards the end of October, and once I returned, I started seeing my PT again to get back into a strengthening routine. I went to PT twice a week during my first month back, but since I was pregnant, I was no longer going to try to get back into basketball shape. So I graduated on Wednesday, November 30th, which was around 43 weeks post-op. I wouldn't say anything really significant happened in December. I continued to run throughout my second trimester with my doctor's blessing, and only recently stopped running at the beginning of my third trimester when I started to feel really pregnant and when my belly was starting to get really big. Tuesday, January 18th, 2023 was exactly 1 year since my injury happened, and on this day I decided to finally go out to the basketball court and shoot around a bit with my husband to celebrate this wonderful milestone. And this really was the first time I went out and played basketball, first time I put my basketball shoes on and all of that. If I wasn't pregnant, I definitely would have been playing basketball before then. Being pregnant basically changed a lot for me, so it's hard to say when I think I could have started playing again, certainly before a year, but yeah, it's hard to say because that didn't end up being what happened with me in my story. Just 2 weeks later, on Wednesday, February 1st, was around 52 weeks. I hit my 1 year post-op anniversary, which of course brings us to 1 full year of recovery. So here we are now. I can't believe it. The question is what's next? Well, once I am able to play basketball again and not pregnant, I actually plan to meet with a physical therapist once again to ensure my leg is ready, and I want to work on getting into a strengthening routine again to prevent further injury. I'd like to have some sort of pre-workout routine that I can use for both of my legs to get them ready for gameplay. But in all honesty, I'm not sure how long it'll be until I'm ready to play again post-pregnancy, and it's possible we may be trying to grow our family again soon after, so a lot of this is really to be determined. That said, when the time comes, I'll definitely share about how it all goes. I'm so excited to get back into basketball shape once I am able to. If this is your first video you're finding of mine that's related to Achilles tendon rupture things, I've made a ton of them, so you're welcome to go check those out. This was the video I made that I wanted to share the full timeline of my recovery, but I have a ton of videos that go way more in depth and in detail at the moment in time in the timeline I was at. So I'll make sure to link in the description below the series of videos that I have there, and you're welcome to go check those out. In the meantime, if you thought this video was helpful, it would mean a lot to me if you gave it a like. And if you enjoyed having a visual reference point to these different milestones I had in my recovery, I created a PDF version of the calendar I used throughout the video, which you are welcome to check out and download for free off of my website. I'll make sure to link this down below. And if you like me and my videos, you're welcome to be a subscriber. I usually create content on this channel about careers in design, working in tech, working remotely in San Diego, those sorts of things. So if you're into any of that, I'd love to invite you to follow along. And if you're in the beginning or the middle or really wherever you are in your recovery journey from tearing your Achilles, just know that I'm wishing you a smooth recovery and sending good vibes your way. That's going to be all for now. I'll see you in that next one. Bye.